Hello, everyone, and welcome back again to the Cloud Show. Today, we're going to have a really good conversation with a friend of mine. Her name is Laïla, and she is a solution architect with particular software, and she does all kinds of distributed application architectures and all those kinds of fun things. I love that stuff. And we're going to talk to her about being a leader in such a scenario, and how do you choose between all these crazy services that are available in the cloud platforms today. So please welcome Laïla. Hello there.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Very good. It's all right over here. I just literally harvested some basil that I'm going to eat. I'm going to have dinner after this show. So
here in Belgium, nothing is growing because it's just raining. You've had better weather.
We do actually have pretty good weather right now. Yeah. We're all right. Yeah. Sorry to hear about the rain, but you're in Belgium. So tell us a little bit about yourself. You're a solution architect and so forth. What else?
I'm a solution architect. I work at particular software. And yeah, I like to sort of solve like complex problems and stuff like that. Also very much love knitting as well. It's a sort of like my meditation type of exercise. Also help me sort of like when I'm stuck in a problem, then I'll just like knit a little bit, and then sort of like the solution will come to me. Sleeping also helps.
Well, it helps, but you know, I know for a fact that you also like cooking because we did some cooking together in the US. That was fun.
Especially if it's like, you know, Spanish, Moroccan type of food, because that's my background. And I love, you know, I love to be able to bring a little bit of my own culture to the table whenever I can.
It's important to have other things. I grow basil, for example.
There you go. There you go. That's also useful, you know.
Yep. Whatever works. All right. But so professionally, you have been for a couple of decades building distributed systems and creating architectures.
Don't make me sound so old.
No.
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
You had 4 other careers before that. Not kidding. No, you're fine. Yes. So you do that. You're a solution architect, and
yes.
And so what there are some issues, right, with using cloud services, and let me just cue that up a little bit. I think that what I see with many of my customers and myself is that they're not accustomed to all of these various services, messaging services and database services, different kinds of databases, and this is hard because you want to be able to use the cloud the best way possible. Correct?
Right. Exactly. Yeah, I think that's sort of with flexibility also comes complexity, right? So now we're in these cloud environments. We have so many services to choose from, but then we have to choose, and that becomes complex. I remember in the early days when I started, it was like database, sure, SQL Server. There was no choice. Like
that was it. Yeah, you're right.
Like even in application development, like the frameworks that we would go for, they were like, it was just like the obvious choices. And now there's like such a huge variety. I mean, there was variety even back then, right? But in the .NET space, things were pretty clear. But now it's like, oof, like, how do I start? Even if you just look at your infrastructure and you're looking at Azure Cloud, it's like, Lord, it can be incredibly overwhelming. And I also don't really believe that as an industry, we can expect people to know about all of these individual services, because it's just like, how do you keep up? So if we have so many things to choose from, and we can't expect people to know all of it, then I think one of the things that we need to invest in is enabling people to basically make those choices and to make better decisions.
Makes
and
sense.
Then that becomes sort of a topic on its own, right? Because how do you then make better decisions on what services to use?
Right.
Because I think
make good decisions.
Yeah, but that's not easy, right? Because I mean, you're also a consultant, right? So one of the things that people hate when you come in, it's like, well, it depends. But that's the thing. It does depend. And any consultant that would come in and you're asking them, oh, which database should I use? And they just give you a flat out answer, probably not a good idea, because they haven't taken the time to ask you, what does your business domain look like, and what do your requirements look like, and what is the type of data that you need to store, and do you find some differences across maybe like parts of the organization or parts of those business requirements. And that's what we really need to do, right? Is to come in, try to understand those things, and then based on that information say, okay, this would be well suited or that would be well suited.
Yeah, that's a really good observation, because if somebody has a strong opinion without knowing enough about you yet, then they may be playing a favorite, right? I know Kubernetes, therefore every application shall always run in Kubernetes, right? Because I have a hammer, now everything is a nail. And
absolutely.
That's not necessarily true, is it?
Yes.
It could be, I think it doesn't have to be, right?
I think this becomes especially tricky when you do bring in consultants, right, that are specialists, that they have some favoritism. I mean, we all do, right? There's also certain services that I have a preference for, absolutely. But I still always try to keep an open mind and try to understand like what it is that you need. As you know now, I'm like very active in the messaging space, but there's plenty of conversations that I have with people where I'm like, well, given what you're building, you don't really need it. Like that's not a good fit, or you would need something else, right?
Why would you use the Azure Service Bus if you're only sending a few messages and it's really easy peasy stuff? You could use an Azure Storage Queue, for Christ's sake. It depends on what you're doing. Yeah.
And it's going to save you a ton of money as well in the process.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
That makes sense. Yeah. So this is the space that you're working in and continuously trying to help, I guess you are, helping, hopefully helping your customers with this. What are some really, I wouldn't say bad things, but what are some common issues that they run into when trying to make decisions to use cloud services?
Well, I think specifically one of the things that is happening currently a lot in the messaging space is trying to understand the differences between when should I use queues or when should I use streams and things like that, right? So it becomes a lot about, okay, what type of again business are you working in? Do you have like a stream of information coming in where each individual piece of information itself is not like really meaningful? Well, then definitely you should be looking into streaming services. But if every event that you're going to publish as part of your system or application is going to be a business meaningful event, well, then maybe messaging is a lot more your space. But this is also what you see, right? Or it becomes clear to me the longer that I am in the industry, is that this is what tends to happen, is that we have sort of new architectural styles coming out, new things being invented, and then we tend to sort of jump on that bandwagon and say, okay, this is the new thing. It's going to help us solve all of those previous problems. We've seen this also with the monoliths to microservices to modular monolith movements.
Now everybody has to have AI services in their application, or else, right?
Exactly.
It's just a mandatory thing now. And then Microsoft recently talked about or announced something that they're putting a lot of effort behind, which is Fabric, right? So it's a huge storage service, if you will. When is that right? And for what reason? And what would you use it for? And
right. So I think that's where it becomes, we need to become, I think, better at carving out some time to look at the documentation, try to understand what the goals of that service is, and then try to align it with what is it exactly that we need to use. But I've seen companies that actually engage in that exercise and make a well-balanced decision, but then still fall into the trap of, okay, we've chosen to use X. Let's now use it for everything, because that
Kubernetes. I'm sorry.
No, I guess no. If you think about it, I can really see that there are some valid reasons why organizations makes these choices, because then it becomes easier to hire. Like, these are the types of skills that you're looking for, and you then usually opt for maybe services that are more widely known and understood, and that you can more easily find resources for. Because honestly, that's again one of the flip sides of having so much flexibility. If you have a very wide system that is using many different types of services in the cloud, and you then need to onboard someone, well, that's quite an onboarding, right? Although,
yes, it is.
In essence, you would assume that within at least a team or a service boundary, or depending on how you've split things up, that should still be like a manageable amount of things. And I think with the appropriate onboarding and training, we can enable anyone to learn anything, right? Because not everything, but anything.
That's true. But
Right.
that's a challenge as a leader. How much do you then, because everything is time and money, right? I mean, you have applications to ship and features to push and all the things that make business and make money. How do you balance making time to allow the developers and IT people to appreciate all of these services and learn about them enough? How do you balance that thing? It's hard, right?
Right. So one of the things that we tend to do, and I've actually already done this at many different employers, is to always sort of carve out some time in the week, just a little bit of slack time that allows you to dive a little bit deeper into things. And this is like still on a level of just keeping my sort of general knowledge up to date, just allowing people a little bit of their time to go into just learning and keeping up to date and with the changes, so that they also become aware of what services are out there, right? That's part one, is just that awareness. And then when it comes to making decisions, I think, one of the things that I've been doing over the last almost 5 years is to practice a very sort of structured approach to decision making, where I make it really clear, first of all, what is the problem that I'm solving, because I feel that that's something that we don't usually think about, or at least not enough. That's why you see so many backlogs.
Can there also be like a disconnect? Sorry to interrupt, but like a disconnect between the actual business problem, what they need, and then the technology that you try to use to implement that. You like, these two sides don't necessarily always know each other well enough, right?
Exactly. And that's exactly the problem that I'm trying to address, because once you start to always think in terms of the problem that you're trying to solve, well, coming up with Kubernetes something, if it's just like, a small tiny part that is right, then it's going to be like, okay, that's going to be a hard sell. And sometimes that's exactly what we need. That's when I always say, like, that's like taking a good look in the mirror. Like, what am I even proposing here, right? And that's a good way to also surface your biases, your preferences, the things that you don't like, and to actually say, no, wait a second. Even though I didn't like it when I was using this in whatever application or whatever previous customer, whatever it is it maybe a good fit today? Because it might. And those services that I was using on the last project that made it super successful, well, maybe they're a terrible fit for what you're doing today.
Yes. And that's the bias that you're talking about, that people you get to know a kind of service or a subset of services. I know these things now, so I will now make architectures that fit the services that I know, and that couldn't always necessarily be appropriate, right?
Yes, I have seen this actually many times. I remember stepping into a project where it was a very, very sort of complex landscape, because there was a lot of legacy. But you also had a team, like the team that had been there for like most of the application's lifecycle. They weren't at all up to date with all of these new architectural styles, with all of these new cloud services. And then it becomes like, and then you had a new team, which I was at the time part of, walking in and saying, okay, so now let's use all of these services. But then the other people were like, wait, what? And you expect us to manage this and to support this, and we don't know how this works. And then it becomes, so a lot of the stories sometimes also, it goes beyond the technology alone, right? So because you could argue in some cases that you might have, let's say, Azure Storage Queues is your best fit. Let's say that for the sake of the example, right? But you have in your team a lot of knowledge about another service, and then it becomes like, so it's always this balancing exercise that we need to do of the people that are going to end up supporting it, and that they're going to end up working on this in the long term. Do they have the skills in-house actually to be able to learn and keep that?
So I couldn't agree more, and what you're saying here that touches upon an important thing. Like, the people who will maintain it in the long run, do they know that what they are using? Do they understand these services? But also as well, the operations side of the house, that are going to actually then operate and take care of this. So I saw this architecture once by a team that were like it felt to me when I looked at their architecture that they had gone completely out of their way to ensure to pick any kind of service that wasn't standard cloud platform service. Like it wasn't a standard like Microsoft Azure service. It was just anything else, everything that isn't that. And then they probably could operate it. I mean, they knew the tech, they knew that subset of services. And then they have this architecture. We were building this application, really proud of their architecture. And then operations took one look at that and they went like, I don't know almost any of these services. I have no idea what this is. So this is also a consideration to have, of course. You have to be able to have a 24/7 operations team that takes care of things, and they have to know how it works, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's why I always say it's like in our field of work, it is not just about the technology. And our work involves so many different angles. It's about understanding our business requirement, which is a massive challenge on its own, right? Understanding a completely new business domain, having access to the people that will even explain to you what the domain is supposed to do and all of those things, right?
Yep.
But then on the other side is also realizing like, okay, especially if you're a consultant and you're coming in for a limited amount of time, like, okay, who am I working with here? What are their skills today? And how can we level up their skills so that they're able to basically support that? You have to meet people somewhere in the middle. You can't just expect them to rise to maybe what your level is, which might be advanced based on your experience, and expect them to be able to then just, okay, catch up.
Yeah, especially if you're bringing teams and applications from you're a cloud consultant maybe, right? And you're bringing them from a pre-cloud era into the cloud. There's going to be a lot of catching up to do for them. This is going to be challenging. And
it's not just catching up. It's like a complete mind shift, I always say.
Yeah, it really is. It can be. I agree. Yeah. Learning how to understand what a distributed application is and how to use these weird services like when the cloud started, it was like 5 services in the Azure platform when it launched. Now it's like nobody knows how many.
I wouldn't be able to tell you.
Nobody knows this number. I don't think anyone knows this number. Now it's so many, and we didn't know anything about graph databases, and now all of a sudden there's this other paradigm. What is a graph database?
I mean, they've existed for a very long time, but we haven't really been exposed to them before, right?
And what I'm saying is we're seeing new teams coming onto the cloud now. We work in the cloud for like a long time now. We have mileage. We know about hopefully many services, but coming in new. Imagine coming in new to the cloud today.
Incredibly overwhelming. Yeah.
That would
actually, it's interesting that you bring this up because I've had a bunch of conversations in the last few conferences where I've been also speaking, where I meet people who are just like finished, their studies and they just started at their first employer, and they're like, oh my God. They come to a conference and they're like so many sessions and they're like, this is so overwhelming. Yes. And it is. I think this is something that, for people like you and me who've been in this industry for a while, we need to acknowledge that what we're exposing them to is magnitudes of more complexity than the things that I believe we were exposed to at the time, because it was a lot more limited.
So you're saying that the way to approach this is to make sure that you have good habits, like take it step by step and ensure that you have some time every week to advance in this in this realm, because it's huge.
Absolutely. And even more importantly is to structure decision making for everyone, because even if, let's say, you have a couple of juniors in the team, even if they don't end up making the decisions, which I actually believe that they should also be involved so they can learn, but let's say that even if they don't make the decision, if you can, as a team lead, as an architect, whatever role you are in, the senior developer, whatever it is, you can write down your thought process and say, okay, this is the problem I was trying to solve, right? This is the context in which I find myself. These are all of the options that I considered, and this is why I chose this specific outcome. And you write that down somewhere and have it available for all of those people to then learn to even if they join I don't know, 6 months from now, they can go
Mm.
back to this sort of like log of decision records. You could use
Yeah.
architecture decision records for that matter, right? And then look at them and start to look at all of those. They can at least have something to sort of, hold on to and say, okay, so it looks like all of these things are related because these are all the things that were considered.
Yep.
And
Yep.
okay, this was chosen because of these and these and these reasons. And they can take that, learn from it.
Yep, and that was not chosen because other reasons, right? Because that's
Exactly.
the case. Somebody comes in and takes a look at the architecture, and hey, why didn't you use a graph database there? Maybe there was a really good reason.
Exactly.
for
But
not doing
nobody
it.
cared to write it down, right?
Yeah, right, right. And then you go and second guess the architecture much later. Interesting.
Yes.
Well, that was such a great summary. I think that's it. We can't say anything better than this. We are at time. This is it. Thank you so much, Laïla, for coming on the Cloud Show today. This was
Thank you for
excellent.
having me.
Yes, our pleasure, definitely. Thank you, and audience. See you again next time for the Cloud Show.